territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. And with that, we'll have a roll call partly to check people's audio. I'm just going to go through the list. So we've had myself. Second is Douglas Wetmore, the Vice Chair.
Present. Thank you, Hugh.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Paul Berry. Paul, if you just...
Yes, I'm here, Hugh.
Okay, thank you. Annika Riopel, is that it?
Riopel, I'm here.
Riopel, okay. You're here, very good. Alison Carlisle.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. Alison. Peter Zimmer, is he not here yet? Not yet. Okay.
We'll try and connect with him.
Okay. Milena Casanavicius.
You almost forgot, Hugh, but I made it in after this panic attack.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Krista.
Okay, that's very good. Andrew Taylor is not here. Mohammed Ehsan is not here. We've had regrets from Miles McCormick and from Councillor Becky Kent. With that, I guess we will proceed. Oh, we have staff members here, of course, in particular, David McIsaac, who is Supervisor of Active Transportation. And our clerk is Krista Vining, assisted. Well, no, Krista Vining. Okay, that's right. Okay. So you have had a circulated version of the amended agenda. And I'd like a motion to approve. Oh, just a minute. I'm sorry. I'm out of order here. Approval of minutes. So we have approval of minutes before we have agenda. The minutes were circulated from the February meeting. If anyone sees any errors or omissions, this is the time to speak.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it's Elizabeth here. I just wanted to let you know I am here.
Yes.
I wasn't able to get to my phone in the roll. You didn't call me in the roll call, but I couldn't get to my phone. Anyway, I won't be able to talk probably most of the time, and I'll be here for the first, I don't know, hour probably. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I didn't hear any concerns with the draft minutes, so I would like a motion to approve the minutes.
I will move to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Paul Berry.
And sorry? Yeah. Motion to approve from Paul. I need a seconder.
I can second that, Hugh.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. So I'll call for the question. Those in favor, please say aye, or you can raise your hand as well using Zoom. Or raise your hand. You can actually raise your hand as well. I think that was everyone. Was anyone opposed? No. Okay, then the minutes are approved as circulated. And we move on to item 3, which is approval of the order of business and approval of any additions or deletions. We have had a late addition that we want to include. It's item 9.1, Regional Center AAA Pocket Bike Map, which will be a staff presentation from Siobhan Witherby. Does anyone have any problems with that being added? No, very good. Then I'll call for a motion to approve the order of business as circulated in the agenda. I need a mover, please.
Milena will move. Oh,
Milena
will move, or I'll second.
Okay, did you get that, Krista? Okay.
Yes.
All those in favor of the approval, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
And anyone opposed, say nay or raise your hand. No one opposed. That motion is approved unanimously. So we move on to item 4, which is business arising from the minutes. As far as I know, there is no business directly arising from the minutes. Item 5 is a call for declaration of conflicts of interest. If any committee members feel they have a conflict of interest relating to the agenda, now is the time to declare it. And hearing none, we can proceed. Item 6 is consideration of deferred business. And there is an item here, which was actually on the previous February meeting. It's a staff presentation on HRM accessibility design considerations within the right of way. And for this presentation, I ask Anne Sherwood to come on stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to ask Philip Nickerson, who's the design engineer on our team, and he's going to be our
Oh,
presenter.
I'm sorry. Okay, yes, I forgot. I do have his name as well. So Philip will be presenting this?
Yeah, Phil will be presenting for the group today, I think. I see him online. You ready to go, Phil?
Yes, I'm ready to go. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Just can bear with me here to share my presentation. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just an introduction. My name is Phil Nickerson, and I'm a design engineer with HRM Project Planning and Design. I work on designs for repaving, active transportation upgrades, sidewalks, bike facilities, intersections, etc. And I'm not an accessibility professional or expert. However, I do have some recent experience working on projects with some accessibility elements and considerations. So I'd like to share some of what I've learned and the ongoing accessibility work that we're doing in HRM within the street right of way. I guess we'll be talking mostly about accessibility with a focus on people with low vision and navigation of bike facilities. And I'd also like to provide an update here on accessibility considerations and challenges within HRM. So just a bit of an overview. I'd like to talk about the standards, accessibility standards in HRM and across Canada, as well as protected bikeway intersection navigational accessibility features. Give an overview of the tactile directional indicators or the guidance TWSIs, how we're looking to implement them in HRM, as well as transit stop accessibility considerations, particularly on streets with protected bike lanes, and the recently drafted accessible parking guidelines for HRM. So all of our planning and design is really shaped by the Integrated Mobility Plan, the AT Priorities Plan, and the recently adopted 2021 Municipal Design Guidelines, known as the Red Book. And so these documents place a lot of focus on complete streets approach with more emphasis on pedestrian, transit, cycling, and road safety infrastructure. This creates a lot of new opportunities, of course, but new challenges that we're not used to seeing. So it's an ongoing process to make make these designs more accessible, and work for everyone. So consultation with accessibility groups and different stakeholders in the public is key to improving our designs as we kind of change our focus. The Nova Scotia Accessibility Act was passed in 2017, which aims to make Nova Scotia accessible and barrier-free by 2030. And this involves a lot of collaboration between various levels of government to create and implement accessibility standards. The HRM Accessibility Strategy Task Force was set up to give a chance for various professionals and departments within HRM to share ideas and come up with plans to meet requirements of the Accessibility Act. And 30 action items were developed last year. A lot of them involve things like communication, procedures, access for internet or mobile, hiring practices, training, etc. But here are a few of the examples adopting a few other items, I guess, adopting CSA standards using Rick-Hansen certification, and signage, and trying to make more accessible taxis, and improving standards at bus stops and playgrounds and that kind of thing. Switching gears to the accessibility standards and guidance, the CSA B651 is the Canadian standard for accessible design. This is what we follow for indoor and outdoor spaces. It has everything from signage to ramps to stairs, handrails, slopes, tactiles, etc. And the CNIB Clearing Our Path recently had a summit, but it also provides some good guidance and gives an opportunity for professionals and accessibility advocates to discuss issues and share ideas. And of course, these guides need to work closely with accessibility groups to gather feedback and to make improvements and updates. There are other jurisdictions that are more advanced in their standards and development and the implementation of accessible streets compared to Halifax. Ottawa is an example of this. They have some good reference standards that we can use because they've implemented these. They're further along in their implementation. And I guess it's important to note that these designs, they're constantly improving and becoming better, and the standards are also improving and developing as well. And the Rick-Hansen Foundation provides accessibility certification for, it's not to be used as design guidance, it's more of a way to rate existing or proposed facilities. So it's a bit of a scorecard for rating as opposed to providing new guidance. So at HRM, the newly developed municipal 2021 municipal guidelines provide some guidance, general guidance for how we should design our street infrastructure to provide a level of accessibility for all users. And listed here are a few requirements in the Red Book and the guidelines. They're more general principles, I guess, rather than specific technical requirements. The CSA standard provides more specifics. Here, there's a lot of requirements for making sure that there's good, enough walking space or enough width for people walking or rolling. Tactiles, providing curb ramps in appropriate places, creating new sidewalk connections, maintaining, accessible slopes and that type of thing. Some of the common accessibility features that we're seeing around HRM include TWSIs or TWSIs at all the new and retrofitted or replaced the new pedestrian ramps to provide a warning for those stepping onto the street, as shown in the image below. As well as APS push buttons, which are now installed at all new and retrofitted locations around the city to help with those with low vision crossing signalized intersections. And we're also working to develop and implement other accessibility standards, such as I mentioned before, trying to make our sidewalks, pathways, walkways, etc., improve, reduce slopes, correct placement of curb ramps, and as mentioned earlier, tactile directional indicators is something we're looking to develop, as well as transit stop accessibility and accessible parking. Protected bikeway intersections are something we're starting to plan and design more in HRM as the protected bikeway network expands. These types of intersections play a very important role in allowing the cycling facilities to become all ages and abilities. So something that's comfortable and safe for anyone cycling from a child to anyone with any level of experience. And these types of intersections have benefits, including it's safer and more comfortable for cyclists. They shorten pedestrian walking distances. They encourage slower vehicle turning movements because of the tighter radiuses on the corners. And oftentimes they restrict right turns on red lights, which means that the cyclists and the pedestrian crossing don't have that conflict. And the crossings are also often offset, which creates an improved angle or visibility for the right turning vehicles to see those cyclists or pedestrians who are crossing. And a well-designed protected intersection should benefit all vulnerable road users. However, they can also create challenges for people with low vision. The previous slide showed a bit of an ideal or schematic protected intersection. This one shows, more of a realistic or what one might look like in reality. And I'd like to highlight some of the challenges for people navigating these types of intersections. First, you're navigating multi-stage crossings. So first you're crossing the bike facility, and then you're crossing the street. And you also have a mixture of signalized and unsignalized crossings. So again, the first crossing the bike facility, unsignalized, and then the street, which can be a challenge. Sorry. And flush crossings. So oftentimes when you're crossing, you have no grade change when you're stepping across the raised bikeway, which can be a challenge because you don't have that grade change to warn that you're stepping into a travelway. And now I'd like to discuss a few elements to help with the navigation at protected bikeway intersections. So this image illustrates a few accessibility features that you might see at a protected bikeway intersection. And if you look to the right, you can see the intended walking path and the cycling route with the walking path shown in blue. So the challenge is, how do you communicate, and how do you make this walking route with these crossing locations work for all people? So I'd like to highlight a few accessibility features to help with this, including attention TWSIs, which are the domed tactiles that we're used to seeing on all our pedestrian ramps. Also tactile direction indicators, which I'll go into a bit more detail shortly, and delineation strips to help delineate between the sidewalk and bikeway. So first, looking at the hazard warnings or the attention twizzies at protected intersections. These are placed on both sides of the bikeway, as well as at the typical curb ramp. And as you can see here on the image on the left, they provide a warning that you're about to enter a travelway, either a bike travelway or vehicle travelway. And this is why you can see so many of them at a protected intersection. They're not meant to be used as a wayfinding cue or an indication of right-of-way. So in Nova Scotia, the law is clear that cyclists need to yield to pedestrians at marked crossings, such as the one shown here. And attention TWSIs are not intended to be used as a form of linear delineation between the two facilities. So instead, delineation strips are used to provide the separation, which I'll talk about now. So when you have two adjacent facilities, such as a sidewalk and a bikeway, it's important to provide some source of delineation to prevent pedestrians from unintentionally entering the bikeway, particularly important for those with low vision. And where these, and often at these protected intersections, these facilities are close together, so it becomes a challenge. So this delineation needs to be universally detectable. Ideally, you'd have enough space where you could place sod in between the two of them, because it creates the most distinct detectable buffer. However, where you have less space, you could provide a textured hard surface, as shown here in intersection of South Park and Sackville Street. And also, you could provide a beveled or a partial height curb to provide the same kind of detectable delineation between the two facilities. It's a bit easier to detect because of the grade change. And of course, the use of this is all based on how the grading and the drainage works as well. So those have to be factored into it. Now I'm going to talk about directional tactile indicators, which are used to provide a wayfinding cue to direct pedestrians with low vision at difficult to navigate intersections. And one potential application could be at a protected intersection as shown here, but I'll talk a little bit more about their other applications. So tactile direction indicators, or TDIs for short, they use flat elongated tactile bars to indicate direction of travel in difficult or challenging environments, including complex road crossings such as roundabouts, offset crossings where the sidewalk isn't lining up with the crosswalk, or mid-block crossings, protected bikeway intersections. Another application is discussed on the last slide, as well as transit terminals and hard surface open spaces like plazas. And it's important to note that these aren't meant to be used as a substitution for good universal design, such as creating direct, level, clear, and well-delineated travel paths. And they're not intended to be used at every intersection, but only where additional cues are required to assist those with low vision. TDIs aren't something that we use regularly around HRM yet, but we're starting to apply them more now. Here's an example on the left of where they were installed at the Dartmouth Bridge Terminal. They direct pedestrians up and down to help them find the right route to their waiting bay. And the CSA standard at pedestrian ramps is shown on the right, and this includes it's 2 foot wide or 600 millimeter wide with TDI tactile with certain requirements for clear floor space around it. It leads down to the pedestrian ramp where you have your attention or your domed TWSI to warn that direct you to the pedestrian ramp, but also warn you that you're about to step out into the road. Here's an example of a tactile directional indicator that was installed on our HRM street this past summer in 2021 at a mini traffic circle at the intersection of Lehman Street and Normandy Drive. It was installed to help with traffic calming as part of a local street bikeway project. And this image illustrates how a circulating vehicle would conflict with the normal straight crosswalk alignments. So the crosswalks had to be offset 2 to 3 meters which creates a bit of an unusual walking route, as shown in red. So TDIs are being installed here to help with navigation at this kind of non-standard intersection geometry. So how it works is as you're walking along the sidewalk, if you intend to cross the street in this direction, the tactile bars will direct you in this way, or if you intend to cross straight, you'll hit this this odd buffer first, which will indicate that it's not the right crossing location, and then you'd be directed to the TDIs over here to cross the street straight across. So it helps provide that actual additional cue to cross the street properly in the right locations. And if you were to cross straight across, you'd be walking over the curb, and you'd be potentially conflicting where vehicles will be circulating the roundabout. In this example, the contractor actually mistakenly installed the tactile domes, the attention tactiles, which I think is just a kind of shows that is something that we're not used to seeing around here, whereas the tactile domes at the pedestrian ramps are everywhere. So this is being replaced, but we intend to monitor the performance of how these work, gather some feedback, and from accessibility groups and from our maintenance personnel and whatnot to see how they hold up and how they're performing. And we're looking at different applications as well, using different products. This is a paver tile that was used here. We're looking at putting another one in, a similar traffic circle, possibly this summer, that would use a cast iron plates for the tactiles, and we can kind of compare how they hold up and try and develop more of a standard or more of a typical practice going forward. So transit stop navigation, switching gears as transit stops. Navigation at transit stops can be challenging for people with low vision, particularly at bikeway crossings. So here's some of the main design considerations to help develop accessible transit stops. Creating a separate waiting space so it's not conflicting with the walkway or with bikeways, places to sit down, accessible grades, visual and tactile cues, etc. So as we're going to be seeing more bike lanes going around HRM each year, one of the major challenges is how do we address the conflict or overlap between the bike lane users and transit users looking to access access the same space, as illustrated in these images. Here's an example of a recent installation at HRM that includes a shared transit bike platform at a bus stop on Hollis Street. Here, it allows bikes and pedestrians to access the same space, and the bikes will ramp up to the higher level which will maintain accessibility and barrier-free access for those using the transit stop. Here, I guess to note, the attention or warning TWSIs are used along the edge of it to warn users that they're stepping into a bikeway travelway. This isn't an ideal arrangement due to the obvious conflict, but it's something we've applied for more shorter to medium term facilities where we have limited space. Here's another example of a transit stop at a protected bike lane installed a few years ago, 2019, I believe, over 7 blocks on South Park Street. The work, I believe there are 10 raised bus stops that were installed here. The advantage over the previous example is that there's a separate waiting space between the seating that can provide seating between the sidewalk and the bike lane. So it gives transit users their own space to wait. This is more of a permanent installation using a cast in place concrete curb and paved paved asphalt bikeway instead of the concrete platform that we saw in the previous example. And an even improved arrangement to that would be something that's shown here. There'd be a separate transit island that would provide a safe waiting area and reduce the conflict space and the duration of the conflict. So you wouldn't be loading on to the bike lane as you were in the previous example. So this could be applied in more permanent installations where we're doing repaving projects, for instance, and where we have space to add in these pedestrian platform islands. And some features to point out here, the raised, this is shown with a raised crosswalk across the bikeway. You know, there's a warning TWS signs either side to warn pedestrians that they're about to enter the bikeway. You could also add in tactile direction indicators too, to direct people to the correct crossing location or to the correct bus loading location. And here's an example that shows some of these tactile direction indicators that would line people up with the right crossing locations at these transit platforms. So HRM is working on a project to implement accessible bus stops across the network. So these types of things will be considered during this review. And finally, going to accessible parking, the HRM's been developing some accessible parking guidelines, which included some public engagement in 2019. And these are kind of being revised and reviewed. The idea is to create consistent, safe, and comfortable parking access, increase accessible parking spaces, improve signage and markings, make it more consistent, widen the space for accessible parking spaces, 2.6 meters compared to our typical non-accessible space of 2.4 meters, and to create space for rear and passenger side barrier-free access for use of a lift or a ramp. Here's a standard detail that's being developed that for an accessible parking space near the intersection. There's a certain clear space requirement on the passenger side door to make sure that there's enough space to easily and safely get in and out of the vehicle. Ideally, this would have a separate space within the boulevard, but sometimes in constrained situations, it would overlap with the sidewalk as well. It also shows a 2-meter rear access aisle for mobility devices and that kind of thing. And this would be an example where you're close enough to the intersection where you could access the pedestrian ramp that way if you were to not come directly out of the passenger side of the vehicle. And similarly, here's another detail, I guess, if you weren't close enough to an intersection to use the pedestrian ramp, now there's the rear access aisle, the parking space lines up with the new pedestrian ramp to give access to the sidewalk. And finally, here's another detail for accessible parking. If you had a lot of space kind of within the sidewalk and behind the sidewalk, potentially to add a separate access aisle, which would be safer and more easily to access. Again, with a pedestrian ramp provided to access the sidewalk. So again, this would be provided in certain situations, but it obviously wouldn't be possible everywhere, especially if you're retrofitting existing streets. And while this is kind of an improved arrangement for accessibility, it's currently under review to make sure that the distance of vehicles parked from the curb is in compliance with the Motor Vehicle Act. So just a bit of an example how this is a work in progress to try and create a standard details and standard parking that will, meet the all the other requirements for motor vehicles, for traffic and whatnot. So there are several new accessibility features and standards that we're trialing and looking to implement in HRM, trying to emphasize close communication and collaboration with stakeholders as a key element to try to make sure that as these new design elements are rolled out, that they're implemented with proper feedback. And of course, it'll be an ongoing process to develop and refine these standards and details. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions. Or
thank you very much, Philip. I have a speaking list, so let's proceed through the speaking list, and I'll ask each person in turn if they wish to make comments or raise concerns. So, Paul Berry, do you have any issues to raise?
No, not at this time. Thanks, Hugh.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Annika Riappel?
Pass.
All right. Alison Carlisle?
I will just say this was a great presentation. I wasn't aware that Halifax was doing this work, or that this work was being done. So I'm really happy to see this going on, and also excited to hear Milena's comments as well to guide. So thanks.
Okay. Krista, could you show? We're still seeing the last slide, but it would be better if that's, thank you. Okay, so Peter Zimmer, did Peter join us? No?
Mr. Chair, I have reached out to Peter by email, but I didn't receive a response back. So I'm not showing him in the meeting at this time, but we have made attempts to contact him.
Okay, because it's somewhat important that he be here for a later item.
Yeah.
Thank you. Milena Casanavicius.
Hi there, Mr. Chair. Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the committee for moving this presentation to today. I would have been there last month, except it was my mother's 70th birthday, and had I not attended, I would not be here today. So I really appreciate for the whole committee. Philip, great presentation. I'm just going to switch to some of my notes. Anne, nice to see you, hear you. Do not take this as an attack, but more of an educational part. I would prefer that this presentation would have been, I guess, designated as what you are doing for the blind and partially sighted. But you refraining to only low visioned is picking only one population out of 40 to 50,000 Nova Scotians who are blind and partially sighted. About 15% of us are completely blind, and therefore we see nothing at all. Just so you know, and so that this committee knows as well. And just let me go through my notes if I may, because I took a few. As I mentioned, Philip, pretty good description. A little bit more description would have been a lot better for me, and I apologize on that because I came in late. I am completely blind, so what you were showing on the slides was, good, but not good in the description, just as you go forward with HRM, because I sit in a lot of stakeholder meetings.
Sure, thank you. Good to know. Yeah.
I also want to say something about the Rick Hansen, which is a great program, but when it comes to actually figuring out and really focusing in on what the blind and partially sighted, it's not where it needs to be. Rick Hansen certifications are really great, but if you look across the country, and if you had the opportunity to tune into Clearing Our Path Summit that was back in February, put on by CNIB, it's lacking. It's faltering. It's moving in the direction where it needs to be, but do not make the recanson the end all and be all, because it is failing on a lot of aspects for those of us who are blind and partially sighted. And again, this is for the committee, but also for you, Philip. It's not an attack, it's more of an education. I'm smiling if you can't see my face.
No, absolutely. And I think the one thing I was trying to highlight was that it was used more as a scorecard as opposed to guidance for accessibility, but understanding that, yes, all these, the CNIB summit is, I did attend that as well. And it's good to hear, but there's lots of improvements coming, I guess, and not taking any one thing as being the be all end all.
Excellent. Good. That makes me happy to hear. I want to go to Sackville and South Park, where the raised bike lane is, and I brought this up on numerous occasions. So for those who have not been to Sackville and South Park, the raised bike lane, if you are, let's say you're at where the YWMCA is and you want to cross towards the public gardens, you have 4 tactile markers. One where the sidewalk is supposedly ending because it is leveled with the raised bike lane. 2, the tactile marker to indicate that you've crossed the bike lane. Then you cross South Park. Then you've got another tactile marker to indicate you're entering a bike lane, and the 4th tactile marker to indicate that you are on a sidewalk. This is something that majority of Nova Scotians Haligonians are not familiar with at all. And while this is a pilot project that may or may not work, it is insufficient. It's dangerous. I know of 3 people thus far, and Anne and I have spoken about this, who have been very confused, including myself, and have walked down that bike lane. And if you can imagine walking down the bike lane when you cannot see, you have no idea where you are. It's completely going off the Monopoly or Risk game board. We are very well aware of our sidewalk markings. So if you're going to be doing pilot projects, and I'm not poo-pooing on pilot projects with the bike lanes, because I too, as a person who is blind, have a tandem bike. I love being in the protected bike lane with my pilot. I'd rather feel safe than not, but you cannot put these aspects of protection or safety in without asking the population, the blind and partially sighted, to come out and test try them. And nobody was asked to do that. What has happened at Sackville and South Park does not work at all. Because let's take an example. In that case, there's 2 on both sides of South Park. But what if you only had the raised bike lane on one side? Therefore, we've got 2 tactile markers on one side, you cross an intersection, and only 1 tactile marker on the other. If you walk as a person who's blind or partially sighted, you will be completely and utterly confused. Am I making sense?
Yeah, thanks, Melana. This is helpful feedback.
Yeah.
It's Anne
Okay.
here.
Hi, Anne. Yeah. And so again, and I say this is 3 people that I know of that walked down that, and they had no idea where they were, because while they were put in according something that was coming out of Ottawa, but Ottawa is now proving that this is not working. It's not. The lower water bike lane, let's refer to that. I was just on the stakeholders meeting yesterday with the improvements that are going to be happening in 2025. That raised bike lane is not only a headache for our bike mare, but it's a headache for those of us who are blind and partially sighted. The tactile markers between the bike lane and the sidewalk are completely insufficient. And again, that was something that was implemented and perhaps a pilot project, but not a single person was called out to give it a test run or test trial. So while it's great that HRM is going and trying, and I really do say this, I'm glad that it's happening, but you cannot put these things in without having people come out to try them and test it and ask, is this working or is this not? Okay, and just a few more items if the committee can permit me. I had a suggestion, and again, and I heard this from actually different municipalities across the country in the Clearing Our Path summit that we had with the raised bike lanes, that rather than keeping them raised at the curbs where the intersections are, perhaps consider leveling the bike lane out where the curbs where pedestrians cross. So the bike is actually right at the same level as the car, as the pedestrian. More than likely it would slow the bicycles down a little bit, because there's a lot of bicyclists that are not slowing down to pedestrians. And so if you leveled it out just at the crossing points, that would make it easier and reduce the tactile markers, not only for those who use wheelchairs, but those of us who are blind and partially sighted. Therefore, we come to a little bit of a downgrade. We understand it's a curb. We cross the intersection, up we go and off we go. As a suggestion, because I can sit here and I can complain, but I can also give some suggestions and ideas, and maybe you can put that in as well.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. I think there have been one or two locations where we've done that as well. And I can see there's certain benefits of doing it both ways, I guess, for various users, but I can understand how that would make the bike lane crossing simpler.
Yeah. And apparently they're implementing those across Calgary and Edmonton, and it's becoming pretty successful. Now, do not misunderstand me. I'm not against protected bike lanes. I want to ride my bike and not get hit, because drivers are not paying attention, right? And then just the last comment. I'm not sure if I understood what you said, Philip, about the island transits. Are you speaking of like a floating island for buses, where bus riders would wait and the pedestrians to differentiate?
Yeah, so it would be a floating island. Yeah, so you would cross a bike facility or bike lane, and then wait on a bit of a floating island or between the bike facility and the street. So it gives a waiting area plus an area to access the load and unload the bus without overlapping the bike lane, which we have seen at other places around the city.
Okay. And I'm going to say, if you did listen at the Clearing Our Path, coming out of British Columbia, there's a human rights that's been brought to task. Hard no.
Yeah, thanks, Melina. We've been aware of the issues that they had in Vancouver, and so the good news is that we've learned a lot of lessons from what happened in Vancouver, and following some of the new guidance in the CSA standard, we've made a few changes. We're not perfect yet by any stretch of the imagination, as you well know, but we've made a few significant changes since then, and I was really interested in your feedback around Sackville, and what I'm understanding is that some of the issue there, the biggest issue is the wayfinding, so that we're not confusing the bike lane for that might be the sidewalk instead of the bike lane. So making sure that's really clear about where the sidewalk is. And I guess some of the trick that we're trying to work through is that we need to use the tactile domes as that warning thing. And now, thankfully, we have the use of the directional wayfinding tiles as another tool we could use, because before that we couldn't really get them here, so we couldn't use them. So that helps on those things where there's sort of the better, wider stuff. We can't use it because we don't have enough room to have the grass grow, and if the grass dies, it's not detectable anyway. So stuff like that. So yeah, I'm interested if you're interested. Be great to go out now that not that COVID's gone anywhere, but now that we're apparently allowed to hang out, even if COVID's still here, it would be great to go out and grab our N95 masks and maybe go through some of the stuff that's been done in the last couple of years and get some more particular feedback from you or anybody else that you'd like to bring along, and then we can see if we can make the next one that much better.
Yeah. And thank you, Anne. And you know me, you know how much you're one of my favorite. I've just
I do, and
the
I,
whole
and I
committee.
and I hope you know how much
Yeah.
our designs have gotten better over the years thanks to your feedback.
But just when the new roundabouts up in the north end that were put in, we had a couple of people coming through, those who use guide dogs and those who use white canes and those who had low vision. So they had enough to see and whether the yellow markers were enough or not. And so those things were implemented, but then they were also given the test run. And I don't see that happening. And it's not just because of COVID. I don't see that happening recently. And this is a big fault. And unfortunately, what ends up happening on the active transportation part, because I'd rather get rid of all cars, is those of us with disabilities get very mad with HRM, and it's not what we want to do. I'm smiling.
I can see that. I appreciate that. I don't know if you can hear the smile in my voice when you laugh, but yeah, no, that's totally fair, and you're right. We haven't had the same kind of check on some of those designs after we've put them in that we did before. And you're right that, when I think about how much we learned from your feedback and those of James, and I forget who else was there that day, but that kind of feedback is it's invaluable, and it really made the difference. We made changes to the next roundabout that we built that's part of the same project as a result of it. So I'll take that to heart, Milena, and we'll do better. Dave McIsaac and I and the gang in transportation will take that feedback back, and the good news is you'll get to hang out with us a bit more, so hopefully that's a good thing.
Oh, definitely. Anyway, end of all my thoughts, and thank you. Keep up the good work. Just don't forget to truly don't forget to call the people out that you are building for, because in the disability community and population, the saying started as nothing for us without us, but now it's starting to be nothing without us. In other words, everything that happens must include us. End of thought, definitely. Thank you for the presentation. And thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Milena. Your comments are very important and very useful. And I'm sure you'll be keeping in contact with Anne and Philip going forward. Just finishing going through the speaking list, though. Douglas Wetmore, do you have any comments?
Nothing to add after that. Thank you to both presenters and Milena. That was very insightful.
Good. Andrew Taylor, did Andrew join us? No, I guess he didn't. And Mohammed Ehsan, I guess, did not join either. Elizabeth Pugh, do you have any comments or questions? You're still with us?
Yep, I am still with you. Thank you. Yeah, hi, Phil. That was really great. And ironically, we had an internal committee meeting this morning on our accessibility work that we're doing. And we were looking at that Lehman roundabout and thinking, what the heck are those yellow things? Because they just didn't seem to be twizzies. And so it's great now to know that what you were getting at with that. And it's also good to know that obviously there was a mistake made and that needs to be fixed, because we were just kind of curious. So I'll be able to go back to my people and explain what you're doing there, which is nice. I also just wanted to thank Milena for her comments and feedback on that, because wow, to have you as a resource for this kind of work is phenomenal. And Anne, if you guys are going out and doing a little walkabout and you feel like having somebody from the province there, I'd love to join you, because we're having to implement these things in some of our rural villages and things as well. So if we can all learn together, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll keep in touch, Elizabeth. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. And David Hensby, Councillor Hensby, do you have any questions or concerns?
Not at all. I appreciate the input. It's very insightful.
Okay, very good. All right, so we'll move forward then to item 7 in our agenda, correspondence, petitions and delegations. Krista, has there been any correspondence received at the clerk's office?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So earlier today, I believe all members were copied on correspondence from committee member Peter Zimmer for item 8.2.1, and this was circulated to all So we'll just include that as part of the record.
Okay, thank you very much. And hopefully everyone has had a chance to look at that. And going forward then, we're on item 8, reports, discussion and updates. And we first have a staff update from David McIsaac. So David, do you have a staff update for us?
Sure, yes I do. I will just sent a note around to the group earlier today and got a few points or a few, I guess, hot projects to communicate to the group. So first of all, we've got a request for proposals out right now around education and promotion for bicycle skills training. So this is a new initiative for us where we are looking to hire an organization to go out in the community and deliver programming that helps people who don't bicycle now start bicycling or bicycle more. So we're kind of interested in seeing what creative approaches we get back from groups, and hopefully that will result in some programming on the ground at places like libraries and community centers and that sort of thing over the course of the summer and fall and maybe even a bit beyond. If folks are interested, and Allison will know a bit about this, commenting on our pilot active transportation wayfinding program, we have a survey up on the Shape Your City site. Previously we had these pilot signs installed on a couple of multi-use pathways, Chain of Lakes and Mainland North Trail and Sackville Greenway, but we just finished installing them on some sections of Vernon, maybe Seymour, a bit of Windsor Street, and kind of in that area. We're just kind of very interested in what people think, and what we hear back will kind of help us determine how we go forward with this initiative in a more permanent way. I'll just say that we've got a lot of projects going out for public engagement in April, May, and June, and I won't give you too much more information because it'll just be a big blurby list. I will, if we start doing this before our next meeting, I'll try to remember to send a list around to the committee so that you're aware. It's just a lot of pent up public engagement that either we tried to do in the fall and still feel we need to do a little bit more in person, or some work that we were going to do under kind of more restrictive circumstances this winter that we couldn't do at all. And now it looks like we're just kind of getting the final guidance from HRM on what hosting public meetings is going to look like going forward. One thing that I would like folks on the committee to know about, because I think that could potentially be a game changer for active transportation in the municipality, is that as part of the budget committee discussions this year, we were asked to bring a briefing note back to council on expanding the new sidewalk budget to about $10 million a year. So right now, the municipality spends about between 2.5 and a little bit over $3 million a year on building new sidewalks. These are to kind of fill in the gaps that weren't built properly in the first place. And just to give you a sense, we've got an inventory right now of about 700 requests. We go out and do an evaluation on all those requests, and of those 700, about 250 have been rated as high or very high, or high priority and above average, I guess is how we classify them. And we look at factors like whether there's a transit stop, whether there's a daycare in the area, proximity of shops and origins and destinations, that kind of thing, to kind of figure out the demand. So I guess council asked us to come back and kind of say, how much could you do if we upped your budget by, up to 10 million. So, a 300% increase almost. And so that will be debated before council, I think later this March. And, if council goes for it, we'll really, we'll be able to take our timeline to fill those gaps from something like 60 plus years down to just under 20 years. So it's still a long time, but it would, what we're doing right now is just a bit of a stopgap, and we're doing the best with the resources we have, but there's a lot of need to fill in some of those sidewalk gaps. So enough on that. We are working on 6 tactical AAA bikeways for the regional center to go in this summer. Looking at streets like Bell, Devonshire, the North End Local Street Bikeway route on Eyesville, Northwood, Fuller, Creighton, and Maynard, Liverpool, Slater Street, and some tactical measures to fill in the gap between the Chain of Lakes Trail and the Bears Road multi-use pathway. What else? I'll say that we're finally starting to work again with our community associations who steward and maintain and operate multi-use pathways. We've been providing grants continually to them, but we hosted our first group meeting with those folks last month, mostly just giving everybody an opportunity to talk to each other. And our goal is over the next year to host some kind of a meeting or workshop every 2 months, and to populate those with sessions that help the groups do their work. So I think we have someone coming in next time to talk about volunteer retention and attraction and that kind of thing. We'll probably have someone from, could be Phil, could be one of the other design engineers, or maybe a couple come in to a future meeting just to work with the groups on troubleshooting and mentoring around project implementation, that kind of thing. So our Catherine McClellan, who's a new staff person with us, is coordinating that. And you'll hear from Catherine at a future meeting, because she is looking at some measures around accessibility. I'm not sure if we're calling them guidelines or guidance might be the best word for our multi-use pathway network. So the intent there is to have information for the public and specifically directed to people with accessibility challenges on the accessibility level of the facility. So information on grades, information on whether there's information there for people with visual impairments, a bunch of different things. And I won't go into it now. It's a meaty topic, but we're trying to have some better information. Along the way, we've learned about various initiatives that are out there that we might implement here. So anyway, you'll hear more from Catherine on that. And the other thing Catherine's working on is sort of emergency response on those facilities. So what happens if you are on the Chain of Lakes Trail, kind of, a kilometer away from the nearest cross street, and you break your leg, or something even more serious could happen? How do you tell the emergency responders where you are? So we're working on that. There's all kinds of things I could talk about. I guess I'll end on the fact that twice a year we issue a request for proposals for our active transportation education and promotion grant program. And the current spring application is open right now. And I believe the deadline is April the 11th. I'll leave it at that. And if folks have any questions on any of those things or anything else, I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. I hear someone's phone. I don't know if, I don't think it's mine. Okay, you got that. Thank you, David. Let's
as I
just
was
go.
trying to compose my thoughts here, but yeah, should be quieter now.
Let's just go through the speakers list and see if people have comments or questions of David. So, Milena, you're first.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, David. Fantastic news on the emergency aspect. Because I always wondered myself, who's going to find me where with my pilot in case we're both falling off the side somewhere. So that's really good to know. And please put my name in for Catherine on the multi-use paths, because they're a sore thorn in my side. Yep. But I have ideas. So thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Good.
End of thought.
You will be hearing from her for sure. I've already
you.
told her to connect with you when she's ready.
Thank you.
Okay, Milena, thank you. Douglas Wetmore.
Thank you, Hugh. I guess just one quick question. You definitely caught my interest with the the sidewalk budget there. If that were to get approved, where do you see the priority? Or I guess you said it would most likely go to those 250 top priority or above average priority. Just so that I can get a kind of frame of reference, where are most of those located, or do you find they're kind of centered around certain communities, or are they relatively spread out around HRM?
So they are, if you think about communities or neighborhoods that were built in kind of the 60s, 70s, sometimes the 80s, there was, when they built downtown Dartmouth and built the peninsula of Halifax, there were sidewalks on both sides of the street, and as they built newer communities in HRM, like say Bedford West or Middle Sackville, or the communities, by that time our standards had come back and new sidewalks were required. But there are communities, I would say Fairview, some parts of Clayton Park, some parts of Spryfield, definitely parts of Lower Sackville. It's kind of in those communities that developed in that era that we have the gaps. There's also, we also look at some of our collector and arterial streets that have public transit, for example, where either we don't have a sidewalk or we've only got a sidewalk on one side. So, St. Margaret's Bay Road, Cobequid Road. Anyway, those are, so I can't really give you exact locations, but it's kind of characterized by communities that were developed in that era. Often by the county of Halifax, that where sidewalks just weren't required by the developers when they built them. And as a result, we're doing this, going back and sort of and filling in the gaps. And it's, it's kind of funny when the new councilors kind of get on and they've just learned like how little we can actually do with the money we have. So anyway, they've asked us to look at, what we could accomplish and how long it would take. And, it's money is tight everywhere, but we'll see if there's an appetite to expand our program.
Yeah, no, fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
Okay, Douglas, thank you. Andrew Taylor? Oh, did we? Okay. Paul Berry.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments. Really interested about that 300% sidewalk budget increase too, just as Douglas was. Will that be exclusively for sidewalks, or would you see any kind of other active transportation links being covered in that budget, increased budget as well, David?
Yeah, it would be just for new sidewalks. I would say sometimes instead of putting a sidewalk in a certain location, we put a wider multi-use pathway, which, under the Motor Vehicle Act is basically a sidewalk that's been widened and made for a broader range of users. But yeah, it's really focused on kind of sidewalks in the right of way, not kind of the multi-use pathways in parks and rails to trails and that kind of thing.
And
We'll still have money
also-
for that. We'll still have money and budget for that, but this is just focused on new sidewalks.
And as the HARTA representative too, just want to thank you and Catherine for starting up some meetings, bringing together the active transportation groups. We did send somebody from our organization to that as well. I haven't gotten an update about it yet, but it's a great initiative and I hope it can continue.
Thanks. It was great. Like, I mean, we had 3 or 4 of the recreational trail groups there, and you know, there was a few newbies there, and it was kind of interesting where it might have been someone from your group was talking to a new person from I'm blanking on the trail out by Porter's Lake there.
Crowbar Lake.
Crowbar Lake. I guess both facilities need new wooden boardwalks, and so they started talking to each other about how they're each approaching the project, and you know, so anyway, just when that happened, I was like, okay, this is why we need to get people together again and learn from each other. So we're super happy that it's happening again.
Excellent.
Hopefully we can do it
Thanks
in
so much.
person next time.
Yeah, that'd be lovely too. Thanks, Hugh. That's all for me.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Annika Briopal?
Yeah, hi, thanks, David. Very excited about sidewalks. Just a question, can you expand a little bit about what you were referencing is going on with the North End with Devonshire and Islaville and Creighton and Maynard? What's coming down the pipelines on those bad boys?
So we're trying to get our AAA network in as fast as possible. And you know, we will be coming back to make more permanent changes on, you know, Isville and Devonshire and that sort of thing. But we're trying, you know, we've got 3 or 4 engineers from Ann's group. I'm not sure if Phil's on the call, but Phil's been helping out with this one quite a bit, where, you know, using sort of temporary measures like speed humps, maybe even some temporary street crossing lights, curb extensions, concrete or pylon barriers for the bike lanes to kind of create that safer separation. So yeah, that's what we're talking about. Does that make sense?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
You bet.
You have
I guess I'm just wondering, because I know that obviously the North End has been relatively contentious, specifically with the community, and I know that there have been some stalls in the community consultation on that project, and I was wondering about moving forward with Tactile stuff without those community consultations being completed.
Yeah, well, some of the community consultations have been completed, and you know, we would do some public notification in advance. And we're not looking with the tactile and tactical. With the tactical program of, you know, significant changes. We're just essentially looking to slow down cars on those streets and hopefully have fewer of them and get some safety improvements that way. And then, you know, we go back to council with you know, what we think should be the permanent changes, but that would only happen after we finish the engagement process. And we actually think, you know, there might be an opportunity to use these tactical measures as part of the engagement process. It's a great opportunity to find out what people think about temporary measures that could help with determining what we do as the permanent changes.
Okay, thank you, David. Alison Carlisle.
Yeah, I'm here and I have a question. Just again, I'm just interested in the tactical stuff as well. Are those plans or any information about those available anywhere for the public, or is it just kind of at this point, or is it just you're putting stuff in this summer and that's when everyone will know what's going to happen?
I mean, if people, I mean, there are some people who are interested, and a resident or two who have asked, and I'll told them I'll come back and give them some information. But it's more of a it's not heavy on public engagement.
Okay. And then I also say it's great to hear that the signs are up, and I look forward to hearing about the results of the survey on that sign and wayfinding project. So thanks for doing that.
Okay, thank you. Did Peter Zimmer join, or is he still not with us? Peter Zimmer?
Still
He's
not
not
with us, Mr. Chair.
He's not with us. Okay. Did he? Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. Councillor Hensby, do you have any questions or concerns? Councillor Hensby? No?
I found my mute button here. I know that the Porters Lake Business Association will be receiving a report from WSP for their business corridor project there. I just want to make sure that I saw that HRM has already provided some comments to the report. I just want to make sure the Active Transportation Advisory Committee was aware of this report becoming, and just want to ask Dave his opinion on what he saw of the report, and hopefully they'll get it on the next Transportation Standing Committee for presentation.
Sure. I haven't seen. I think I saw an email on it. We were not one of the groups that was consulted on that one. So I'm super interested in it. It's timely, now that we have kind of a framework to work on rural sidewalks. I think Porters Lake is one of those communities that has the kind of context that where a sidewalk would fit. So it's great to see that work coming forward, and I suspect we'll be doing more work there going forward.
Also, the Muscatava Harbor Chamber of Commerce are eager to get on with the design studies for their particular project as well. So I have a meeting with them in the MLA's office on Sunday. So just want to give you a heads up that Muscatava Harbor will also be coming looking for design work to get it initiated. Yep.
No, that's so kind of the way the rural sidewalk program is going to be unfold is that taxes are like slowing us down, but we're going to go back to council with kind of a mechanism that we would propose, and then we'll go out into those communities and do the engagement on the design, and also feel out the community on how they feel about having a tax increase if they get a new sidewalk.
Well, I'll debate the tax issue. I think the more should be like the regional transportation zone instead of us having localized area rates. I think we should be looking at this in a more global approach within the rural commuter shed as the regional plan proposes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Elizabeth Pugh, did you have any comments or questions? Did Elizabeth leave? I guess so. And for myself, I just have a brief comment. I'm very pleased to hear about the possibility of the $10 million for sidewalk gap, filling in sidewalk gaps. I live in a community in the former city of Dartmouth, actually, that has virtually no sidewalks. I think just one sidewalk on an arterial. All the residential streets have no sidewalks at all. And it would be nice for areas like that to at least get some sidewalks on the sort of the main routes through them. With that though, let's move on. The next item was actually proposed some time back by Peter Zimmer, a member of this committee, and he wants to talk about the terms of reference for this committee and widening them to include vulnerable transport users, micro mobility transport, and so forth. Peter is not with us though, and I guess he had trouble joining the meeting. That's correct, Krista?
I'm not sure. Well, as many of the members at the start of this meeting, there seemed to be a glitch with the link that was sent. I did send him the updated link. I have not heard back from him whether he had planned to attend or not, or if he was still experiencing any issues. You do have his correspondence in front of you. You can choose to sort of discuss it this evening. You could also choose to defer to the next meeting to discuss with him. It's really something that you as members can determine.
Yeah. Yes, I've been thinking about this. It seems like Peter was with the letter that we received just today was almost proposing a specific motion for discussion. But in fact, my understanding is we normally would require notice of motion unless we're dealing with something from a staff report. I believe that's correct. And
yeah, in this case, Mr. Chair, where you report, you're an advisory committee, and where you report to the Transportation Standing Committee, if you were looking to possibly change your terms of reference, it would basically be a motion to Transportation Standing Committee to request a staff report around investigating all of this. So you wouldn't necessarily need to do notice of motion on your end.
Okay, but related to that, I was wondering about a staff report on that whole issue that this committee could hear.
Yes, the committee would need to make the request through the Transportation Standing Committee to request a staff report to investigate those, because you're a body of Transportation Standing Committee.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I suspect then we should simply defer this item until next time. And at that time, we can have a general discussion. We can hear Peter's concerns. And if we feel it necessary, then we could request a staff report via the Transportation Standing Committee. Does that make sense? Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And this is Milena speaking. Knowing Mr. Zimmer just recently, I think he would rather speak on it himself. So I move to defer, if that's where we are.
Okay, that would be good. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'd be glad to second that, Hugh.
Okay, Douglas seconds a motion to defer this item. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, or raise your
Aye.
hand. Anyone opposed? Nay, or raise your hand. No one is opposed. So this item will be deferred until the next meeting. And we can proceed, but the added item, which we added, 9.1 on the Regional Centre AAA Pocket Bike Map, apparently there is no staff available. There was a glitch in communications, and that also then would be deferred until next time. Is that correct?
Yes, I apologize, Mr. Chair. So in communication with staff in the clerk's office, it had been thought that this would be presented at tonight's meeting and added as an item, when in fact staff was just asking to add it to the April's meeting for discussion. So you will have a presentation in April. They're going to bring 2 consultants and staff will be available. If you do have preemptive questions around it, David McIsaac is here and can possibly speak to some of the background around it, but certainly you'll get a fulsome presentation in April around it.
Okay, well, that seems fine. I don't think we need to get into it today then. And I don't think we need a motion to defer. Is that correct?
No, that's correct. We're going to basically, I've already touched base with we'll put in the minutes that that it would be added to the April agenda rather than for tonight's discussion.
Excellent. Okay, that just leaves us then with item 10, date of next meeting, which is set for April 21st. And as far as I know, there's no St. Patrick's Day happening then. And it's only 2 days before the St. George's Day. So I think we're okay. So I do need a motion to adjourn, please.
Before we do that, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind,
Yes.
and I apologize to the committee because I'm not familiar on how to go about this. I just wanted to ask. So yesterday I was in on a stakeholders meeting on the project concerning lower water. And I'm just wondering if we are aware, or do we ask them to do a presentation here? I think it would be very valuable and valid. Or and it may, Krista, Mr. Chair, I don't know how we would do that on the project that redeveloping Lower Water Street.
Well, it sounds like it could be useful, but again, from what Krista was saying, does that mean that we would that it would be the Transportation Standing Committee that would?
No, so if you're if the committee's looking for information from staff, you can certainly make a request to get a staff presentation at your level. All we can do is ask and see if staff's available to present that information to the committee.
Okay, then I would take Milena's suggestion and ask staff to have such a presentation on the Lower Water Street planning, transport planning. Is that all we need to do, or do we need a motion on that?
I don't think it wouldn't hurt to have a formal motion that you're looking to have a staff report on this. If you have any specifics that you're looking for, you could identify it. It does help staff plan their presentation if they do accept and are available to present. Okay. It's a little bit more unique because it's not necessarily an external body of HRM, where, and again, that would just be an ask as well. So it's really up to you as the body if you determine you want to put it as more of a formal motion. But certainly we can make a note in the minutes that you're just looking to have a staff presentation on the Lower Water Street.
Okay, but if it's helpful, perhaps Milena would make a motion on that.
Then I shall move, because what I heard yesterday might be of interest to this committee here, and for the committee to ask their own questions. Therefore, I move that we ask if staff could do a presentation on the Lower Water Street redevelopment plans.
And do we have a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second it, Paul Berry.
Thank you, Paul. Then I'll move to, I don't think there's any discussion required, so I'll move to.
I have one question about.
Oh, yes, David, yeah.
In regards to that, Hollis Street now has a dedicated bike lane running its whole length now. And we also have the boardwalk on the waterfront. Now, with Lower Water being in between those, I didn't think Lower Water is being identified as an AT corridor.
Yes.
It is going to be, there's proposals of bike lanes and transit.
And yeah, so lower water is approved as a for northbound bike lane. Hollis is the southbound bike lane. And then what this project is doing is kind of looking at all the other elements, sidewalk widths, whether there's going to be bus lane, parking, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Certainly sounds that it is relevant to this committee. So if we can proceed, we have a mover and seconder. Those in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay or raise your hand. Okay, motion approved. So we are, and that will go in the minutes, we are requesting then a staff presentation on transport related planning for Lower Water Street. Okay. All right, and that now we can have a motion to adjourn if someone will move it.
Happy St. Patty's, let's adjourn.
Okay, we don't require a seconder. Thank you very much, everyone. David Hensby, you have a quick comment? Or no, you're leaving.
Happy St. Paddy's Day, folks.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Hugh.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.